Hello YouTube, Goddard Radio Mosky here again with another beer review for you, as is usual. For this one we're going to head back over to New York in the United States to visit the Brooklyn Brewery. And I've reviewed two of their beers for you already, which was the Brooklyn Lager and also the Brooklyn Winter Ale. So this time we're going to have a taste of their Summer Seasonal, which is simply called Summer Ale. So as you can see here, this is the Brooklyn Brewery's Summer Ale. Now I've tasted this one before actually, so I can remember roughly what it's like, but I'll be interested to actually think about it a little bit more for the review for this one. But as is usual with my beer reviews, I'll take you through a brief history of the brewery, tell you a little bit about where the beer comes from and all of that sort of thing. But as I always say, if you are simply just interested in the tasting of this beer, then feel free to fast forward towards the second half of the video and you will catch that. But as always, the brewery website is in the video description there, along with the link to my other Brooklyn beer reviews. And I will very shortly review the Brooklyn Brown and also the Brooklyn Pumpkin Ale for you at a later date. So subscribe to the channel if you do happen to be interested in those reviews. But anyway, to move on to the history of the brewery. The founder of the brewery is Steve Hindy, who was an Associated Press correspondent for a number of years. But in 1984 he returned to the US from a 6-year stint in the Middle East, and he settled down in Brooklyn's Park Slope neighbourhood. But while in the Middle East, Steve had become interested in home brewing after meeting many diplomats who actually brewed their own beers in countries like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, where alcoholic drink is actually forbidden due to the Islamic law that's in place in these countries. But along with his downstairs neighbour Tom Potter, Steve decided to quit his job and he founded the Brooklyn Brewery. And they commissioned 4th generation German-American brewer William H. Mueller to develop the recipe for the Brooklyn Lager, which is now famous. And he did that up in Utica in New York. And they had to move the production up there simply due to their limited resources at the time. But Mueller's grandfather had in fact brewed beers in Brooklyn many years previously, and he'd actually left his brewing books and recipes to his sons, so they passed through the family for quite a number of generations. But it was very difficult for Hindy and Potter in the early days of the brewery. They actually found that many New York distributors were controlled by the big breweries and really weren't interested in the small craft brewed beers. But they also hired Milton Glaser, who's very famous for the I Heart New York logo that you'll probably have seen on a lot of touristy things. And he designed their bottle art and their brewery logo for them as well. And after advice from Sophia Collier, who is the founder of Soho Natural Soda Company, we don't get that over here in Scotland actually, the pair actually brought a van and a beverage truck and began peddling their beer from store to store on their own. But at this point in the 80s, crime was very high in New York, and Hindy and Potter faced burglars, armed robbers and mob-connected people who actually wanted to take a piece of the brewery for themselves. And New York taverns actually at this time were also very sceptical, because the price of the Brooklyn beer was also the same as that of the premium imports, and it really wasn't very well known at all, obviously, in the early days. But in 1994, the company actually hired respected New York brewmaster Garrett Olivier to actually to design their planned Brooklyn Brewery and to oversee the production at the Utica site. Now Garrett is also the editor-in-chief of the Oxford Companion to Beer, and he also authored a book entitled The Brewmaster's Table. And the new brewing facility that he designed was actually opened in 1996 by New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who actually went on to pour the first official glass of the beer as well when he was there, and that was the Brooklyn Vice. But since then, Garrett has actually developed many award-winning beers for the Brooklyn Brewery, and you can taste these if you ever buy any of the Brooklyn Brewery stuff yourself. Now in 2003, the partners decided that the company had grown to such a volume that they could actually be a big client on the books of a distributor. So Tom and Steve actually sold their distribution division to 2 large New York wholesalers who'd actually rejected them 15 years previously, and the main one here was the Phoenix Beehive Distributors. But at this point, Tom, who had been running the distribution business for 15 years, sold his share in the brewery to David Ottaway, who'd been a good friend of Steve, and he'd been a very early investor in the brewery in fact. And Tom Potter now runs a distillery called the New York Distilling Company, which is up in Williamsburg in New York. But David Ottaway's son Eric and Robin, they had actually been running the Boston distribution business for Brooklyn, and the Ottaway family did actually have their roots in Brooklyn. Their grandfather, General John Blackburn Woodward, had unsuccessfully stood for the mayor of Brooklyn in 1885, and he was the board president of the Brooklyn Institute for Arts and Sciences. And Eric is actually now the brewery's general manager, and Robin is the sales manager of the brewery. So this family, the Ottoways, are very heavily involved in the brewery these days. But today the brewery are apparently overseeing major expansions that will double their capacity with the creation of their Rolec brewhouse, and they hope that this will allow Garrett and his team to experiment with many new recipes as well. They've had a similar range for a number of years now, but apparently the first of these experimental beers was a spicy saison called Brooklyn Radius, and it was brewed exclusively for the borough of Brooklyn. So hopefully when I go back over to New York in a little while, I can pick up one of these and review it for you as well. But nowadays their beer is apparently available, just to give you an idea of how big this company has grown. Their beer is apparently available in 25 states throughout the US and in 20 countries, and 2013 was in fact their 25th anniversary, and so they introduced their silver anniversary lager, and this is a double bock version of the original Brooklyn lager, which was introduced in 1988. And these guys were in fact one of the first American craft beers that we could get over here in Scotland, so it's really quite cool to see how this company have kind of grown, and by many these are considered one of the pioneering breweries in the American craft brewing renaissance, if you like. But to list the other beers that you can get from the Brooklyn Brewery in their perennial range, which in other words is their core range, you get the Brooklyn Lager, the Brooklyn Brown Ale, East India Pale Ale, the Pilsner, Pennant Ale, and also the Brooklyn Blast. In the seasonal range you get the Black Chocolate Stout, the Winter Ale, the Monster Ale, Dry Irish Stout, the Summer Ale, which is this guy here, the Oktoberfest, and the Post-Rock Pumpkin Ale, which I will review for you at a later date. They also have several big bottled beer as well, and this includes the Silver Anniversary Lager, which I mentioned to you a minute ago. They have Local 1, which is a Belgian style golden strong ale. Local 2, which is a Belgian style dark ale, Sobachi Ace, which is a farmhouse beer, Green Market Wheat, Bamboozle, the Brooklyner Schneider Hopfenweiss, which is a Weissbock, and that's all of their ones there. And they do apparently bring new beers out every so often in that big bottled range, so keep an eye out if you see different ones there. But let's get on to the tasting of this guy itself. I'll bring up the camera and just let you have a little closer look at the artwork on this guy. It's the similar style of artwork that you'll always get from Brooklyn. I'll just move the light down a little bit so you can see that better. As you can see, it's the same style of artwork you get on these, just a slightly different colour. This guy is a sort of sky blue, if you like. The brown ale is obviously a kind of reddish brown, and the East India one I believe is the orange label, but they all have the similar labels on there, and they all have the different coloured caps as well. The similar style, each one just obviously has the same sort of background colour, I guess you can call it, on this one. But let's get this guy out and get on with the tasting here. This guy is a 5.0% pale ale. I took down the malt base for you as well. This guy uses 2-row British malts with German, Pearl and American Cascade, Fugal and Amarillo hops, so it's got international hops in it there, and this guy is apparently available from March to July, so you should still be able to get it at this point that you're seeing the review. But many craft beer shops throughout Europe don't sell all of these in one go. They tend to sell their beer quite slowly, so you might be able to get it at kind of random points during the year throughout in Scotland and of course in wider Europe as well. But let's get this guy open and get on with the tasting here. As I mentioned, it's a 5% India Pale Ale. You can see, nice smoky opening on it there. Nice kind of bright golden colour here as we get it poured out actually. Let's just shake it up a little bit and see if I can get a nice bit of head on this guy. That's poured quite nicely actually, like a boss as they say. So, as you can see, a really nice kind of bright strawish golden colour here. Very, very clear actually. I can see if I put my fingers behind that, I'm sure you can see that just through the camera here. A very nice sort of finger of white frothy head as well, and it smells very fresh. That's the first thing I'm picking up on it. You can see my fingers just through the glass there, getting a bit of condensation because of how cold the beer is. But very, very nice looking beer in fact. So in terms of the aroma with this one, it does smell, it's quite malty smelling actually. It's got quite a nice sweet malty aroma on this one. It's got a lot of kind of floral and aromatic hops to it as well, but it's got a good hint of grassy character, and there's a nice bit of kind of citric fruitiness in there as well, and some caramel in the background. You're also picking up just a little bit of spice with this guy as well, so it's a very, very nice aroma to this guy, I should say. And it said on the website as well, it's a modern rendition of they said it was the modern rendition of the light dinner ales that were brewed in England, actually. So you can smell that in it. It does smell like a sort of English pale ale style beer. Very, very nice smell, man. That malt base in it smells really attractive. A nice kind of caramel and sweet biscuity taste to it. In terms of the taste, it does kind of follow that quite a bit. It does taste like a sort of English style pale ale. in the opening, you're getting the nice bready malts that have got just a nice little bit of kind of cereally spice character to it. But the caramel character is coming out in there as well, which is giving it a sort of impression of biscuity malts. It's got a sort of biscuity malt sweetness to it. But as you're going through this beer as well, you're actually moving. It moves into the malty part of the beer, kind of sticks with you quite a bit. The hop part is more subtle. This is a more malt dominating beer in my opinion. It does have quite a nice sort of, the hop part of the beer is very nice and very kind of grassy and floral aromatic, which is quite reminiscent, as they say, of these sort of English light dinner ales, or the English pale ales I should say. It does, I would say it has maybe just a little hint of kind of earthy character coming out in the malt base as well. There is quite a bit of cereal in there, which does give that little hint of spice and earthy character to the bready malts in the opening, and the caramel blends with it quite well as well. And as I say, that's giving you the sort of impression of a kind of biscuity malt in there. But the hop part of the beer is very fresh, I would say. It's not too prominent, but you've getting some nice sort of grassy and sort of floral aromatic-y character, and just a little bit of citrus in there. But that's, as I say, the hop part of the beer is kind of very subtle, I would say. But that said, kind of at the back of the tongue, that's where you're starting to get the sort of hop freshness to it. The malt base kind of sticks to the middle of the tongue, but at the back you're starting to get that kind of hoppy freshness, and just on the edge as well, the sort of grassy and citric flavours are kind of lingering on your tongue. It's quite nicely done actually. I'm not a great fan of sort of English pale ales, and honestly I prefer the IPAs and the American pale ales. But this guy I do think is quite well done. In terms of the mouthfeel with this one, I'd say it's mid-bodied actually, which is standard for the English pale ales. And I would say the carbonation is actually just quite standard. It is quite crisp and it does have a lot of freshness to it. I would say it's very easy drinking. You could easily make these a bit more. You could easily sit and drink these for a bit of a session if you like, and it's only got just a little bit of dry character. But overall I would say it's a nice and fresh beer, but in honesty it could do with having the hops being a little bit more prominent with it to give it a bit of a better balance, and just having a little bit more bitterness with it as well would help it. But at that time they have got the freshness of this beer very, very well, but as I say, it could do with just a little bit more of a kind of hoppy bitterness to it. But overall it's very nice. I mean, it's a good sessionable ale, and that's what you would want for a summer ale. But the carbonation on this one, I should point that out as well. It doesn't particularly, I would say, if you take a little gulp of it, it comes in quite quickly and spreads over the tongue. And it does have just that little prickle to it as well, so it doesn't smooth out like many other beers do, which is quite interesting, I would say. But overall, in terms of a summer ale, it's a nice easy drinking one, which is obviously what they were going for. And it's, you know, as I said, I think this beer could do with just a little bit, having a bit more hoppy character to it. It's got all those nice kind of German hops in it, but they don't, the German and American hops in it, but they don't seem to come out so well. It's more of a malty beer, this one, but it does represent the English pale ale style quite well at the same time. So it's maybe if they want to take another take on it, they could add a little bit more hoppy bitterness to it. But overall, fairly decent beer, really. I can see it being very enjoyable on a summer's day. Apologies for my cough, just kind of recovering a little bit from that. But overall, I can see it being a very, very nice kind of summery ale. And they've got the English pale ale style quite well. So Brooklyn have made like another quite nice beer, I would say. So anyway, if you do get the chance, check out this guy and let me know your own thoughts in the comments section below. My only down point with this beer is that I think it could do with a little bit more hoppy bitterness, but each to their own. A lot of people will think the beer's perfect as it is. Beer is subjective, as they always say. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. As always, I hope you've enjoyed it and found it informative, and please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. I will be back soon with more beer reviews, and I will be reviewing the Brooklyn Brown and the Pumpkin Ale for you at a later date, and I'll catch you soon with another review in the next few days. Cheers.